Welcome to Cape Ann Report. I'm your host, Maureen Aylward. Cape Ann Report is a weekly program that covers programs and events on Cape Ann. For this show, I'm speaking with Joanne Castano, Rebecca Reynolds, and Pru Fish about the Manship Artist Residency and Studios. It's a very exciting project. Ladies, thank you so much for being here on Cape Ann Report. Let's start out learning a little bit more about the Manship project, the Manship Artist Residency and Studios. And Rebecca, would you give us a brief overview before we get into some other exciting details?
Sure. So the Manship Artist Residency and Studios is a 501c3 that started to save the Manship property in Lanesville. Really, it's a preservation project, but it has other components. It has so much to do with the history of Cape Ann, the culture here, and also conservation. It's an incredible property, over 15 acres, that has 2 quarries and 2 very important historic buildings, as well as some outbuildings in Lanesville.
And what is the purpose of the project overall? What's the vision that you want to have?
Really, it's a continuation of the Manship legacy and what Paul Manship, and so many other artists were doing on Cape Ann and have been doing here for, over a century. So Paul Manship, if you don't know Paul Manship, I know you do, but maybe not all of the viewers do, yeah. But everyone knows his work. He's one of the most important sculptors from the 20th century. He did the Prometheus at Rockefeller Center.
At the skating center,
that's right.
Rockefeller Center in New York City.
So that golden boy that's flying over the ice skating rink, that's by Paul Manship. He has work all over New York and all over the country, really. He's a prized possession of many museums. In fact, the Cape Ann Museum has work by him as well. People have probably seen the tortoise. It's a much beloved sculpture at the Cape Ann Museum. Mm-hmm. And so he's very significant in the history not only of Cape Ann, because he was part of the community here, he's also very important in terms of American art and sculpture.
It's such a vital project that you're doing because it's based on community. I mean, it's in Lanesville area. It's a significant property, and it has international significance as well. And Pru, I was wondering if you might also tell us a little bit about the history of the buildings, because the buildings were once somewhere else.
Yes.
And this is your specialty, Pru.
Yes. Manship, after renting for a number of summers in Gloucester, or in Pigeon Cove, I think it was, wanted to have his own property. It was during World War II, and there was a shortage of building materials and so forth. And there was a house in Pigeon Cove across the street from the tool company, which he was able to buy and take down, which he did, and moved it to Lanesville and re-erected it on one of the quarries. Then he still needed a studio. He found an ox barn near Hodgkins Cove that had been part of the quarry industry, and took that down and moved it to Canny's quarry. So now the house was on the edge of one quarry and the studio on the edge of another very large quarry. And it took some time to put this all together. He used a lot of local people. He had his architect came from New York City. They had done projects together in New York. His name was Eric Googler, and he was very important. He had been working for Franklin Roosevelt, and he had redesigned the West Wing of the White House and the Oval Office. But he and Manship were kind of a team, and he came to Lanesville, and it was just amazing that this major architect was involved in this project, and together they imagined and put together the whole thing. And it was the late 40s, I guess, or maybe even 1950 before everything was completed. One thing that amused me was that after doing this major project, and they were ready to move into their house, and they were almost shot down because they couldn't get a telephone.
Because they needed the telephone?
They didn't
to
want to come
telephone.
from New York and not have a telephone.
Yeah, and needed to communicate.
And so that was the biggest stumbling block after doing this huge project that came out just beautifully.
Well, it's so amazing. There's such rich history. You never know what you're going to find in these little corners, nooks and crannies of Cape Ann. And this is a significant project for Cape Ann. Joanne, tell me a little bit about what you're doing as part of the project.
The Manship project, as we're calling it, it was a little over a year and a half ago. Rebecca invited me down to the property, saying that there was Manship's property and come down and look at it. And it's anyone that comes through there, your jaw drops, especially if you're an artist, but also if you just want to preserve and protect this land. So we got involved working together, and more people got involved. And protecting the property so that I've lived in Italy before and worked in residencies, and to have this environment come to Cape Ann with such a rich heritage, it was just so exciting. So that to have a residency, maybe 4 or 5 artists will eventually be able to come and live and work there for short periods of time, maybe 6 weeks. It's all still in development of thinking about how to do this, but there's the house and 2 quarries and woodland and 15 acres of beautiful land. But also we wanted the studios, and to later develop out studios so that the residents can use these spaces as well as the community. So it's very important that the community be involved in what's happening there, and the access to it. The open space is extremely important.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how will the community be involved? There'll be open space, there'll be access, people can use the property. Will they be able to somehow access it through there, or come into the property as a place where you'd go to an event or a show?
For events, also pathways that may be designed out so that people would have walkways that some people already are walking through there. So you don't want to take away what we already have.
Right, I know.
Nobody likes that.
There's not a lot of space at Cape Ann left anymore.
Not a lot of space, so we need to grab it and hold it and keep it, cherish it as well as we can, so that there would be performances, outdoor exhibitions, indoor exhibitions. Also that the residents that come in, if they're local or national, international people that come, they can engage with the studios that are here. We have master artists all through Cape Ann.
Right.
So that a lot of times if you're working in a location and you need a printer, or you need a wood carver, or you need to add that element to the work that you're exploring, we have all the studios that you need on Cape Ann. So
Indeed.
You're able to go out and find a printmaker, and that will enliven and bring up everyone else along with us. So it's not just one studio, it's everybody's studio.
Is there anything like this right now on Cape Ann, there's been residencies, and there's always artists, of course, coming through. But has anything like this ever been set up before?
Well, the difference here, there are some well-established and wonderful residencies, in particular the one on Rocky Neck. But the difference here is that they have the opportunity to be in community. And that's huge for artists.
Yeah.
And then also for them to engage with the community as well. So we have both possibilities. You talked about access. And as Joanne said, there are people using it already now. In certain ways, it's very limited because it is a private property at the moment.
Right.
But there are areas that we would like to keep for the artists, except when we're having public events. But then it's 15 acres, so there's a lot of land that can be open to the public on a regular basis.
Let's talk about the area again, because it's the history of the area is so rich, and also Manship and his work is internationally known. And how is that going to? How are you going to spread the word that this is out there?
Well,
Lots of ways.
there's lots of ways to do that.
Because
I mean,
it has an international pull as
It
well as a
does.
national pull. I mean, just
Sure.
hearing what we heard from Pru and the folks who were involved in this.
But I think one thing we can't forget is that, you know, Manship is probably one of our most important, one of a few really important artists that were here. But there were many, many others. And this is our opportunity to save one of these residencies. I mean, so many of the other ones are lost. But he was part of a larger community, and particularly in Lanesville, there were so many other artists there. There was Walker Hancock, and George Demetrius, and Charles Grafley, and Leon Kroll. And so they used this place to get away from the city, New York. Charles Grafley came here because his daughter had asthma, so she needed to get away from Philadelphia. But they came here to play with their friends and to entertain their patrons as well. They would invite them up. And so at the Manship place, he exhibited his sculpture. There were like rooms, you might say, outdoor rooms on the property
really?
where he would install work.
Gorgeous.
Oh my
The three
goodness.
bears were on the property in a kind of a wooded area near a path where people walked up.
And you have experience with this?
My children played with the three bears, and when they saw, my daughter saw it advertised, the three bears in Antiques magazine years ago, and called me up and said, "I just saw the three bears in Antiques magazine. What is going on?" But
They went to the Metropolitan Museum. They're in New York City, those bears, yeah.
Right.
They're not out there in the woods anymore. But when these sculptors and artists first came, the quarry, this had been in the heart of the quarry district. The landscape was very scarred when the quarry shut down. It was just denuded of trees. There were derricks and equipment left behind. It was like strip mining. It was a mess. And then the trees began to come back, and the quarry pits filled with water. And the artists started to recognize the beauty, and Walker Hancock and the Manships and different people, artists bought them. And the local people said, "Why in the world did they want those pits?
Because
they're dangerous, they're bottomless, they can drown in them. Why do they want to live in the woods?" And so, but it's obvious that they knew what they were doing, because now they're very desirable.
The other reason why Manship really liked Lanesville in particular and Cape Ann was because it's a dark place.
Oh, you could see
The night sky.
That's
so when he was there weren't as many trees, and it's, you know, he had like a 360 view of the night sky, and his work has so much to do with the night sky. One of his most famous pieces is the Celestial Sphere. His daughter and son-in-law, who are also artists who live there, there have been three artists who have lived in this place. They told me that Paul used to wake them up, John's father, in the middle of the night and have them go out and look at the night
because
sky.
it's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. But also he had the fireflies. Remember fireflies?
Oh, yes.
And is just walking through the property so much now. We had talked about, where's all the fireflies? If we could only bring them back, we could have a firefly festival or something.
That's something to look into.
Your imagination just is free to wander just as they wanted to play there.
Well, it makes me feel so lucky to have you ladies working on this project, and to have people in the community that care so much about saving the property, because it needs to be saved. It needs to be preserved. It's such a part of our rich history and our artistic history. And I just want to, again, thank you for being on Cape Ann Report and all the work. And more people can find out about the Manship Project. We have the website that's been on here. And also you have a gallery opening on July 8th at Flat Rocks.
Correct.
But thank you all for being on the show, and until the next time on Cape Ann Report, take care.